weekend? Yeah. Let me look into the camera, say hello to our Journey family online. We're so glad that you're with us this weekend, and to our church family in Hockessin gathering at Wilmington Christian School right now. We love you. So glad you're here. Newark, will you help me give it up for everybody at every location? We love our church family, and we're spread out right now, but we're experiencing God's goodness together, and worship this weekend has been so incredible, and I'm glad you're a part of it. And we are, if you have been hanging out with us the past few weeks, you know that we have been in a series called Didn't See That Coming, and we added a bonus week. So you're gonna get a chance to hear that message from our Next Steps pastor in just a couple of minutes. It's gonna encourage you and strengthen your faith today, I promise you. Already had an opportunity to experience it, and this message is gonna be life-changing for you. And before we jump into it, it's Christmas time around here. So I know everybody has kind of a different Christmas vibe going on. Some of us have had our decorations up since the 5th of October, and others of us are just getting around to it. But it's Christmas time, and part of that for us as a church family, as a community of faith, is our Christmas offering. It's happening next weekend, and I'm very excited about this because it's an opportunity for us, like we do every year, toward the end of the year around Christmas time, to be generous above our regular giving, beyond our walls, and to make a difference for people who are in need and people who are struggling, and also to expand the vision of Jesus in our world. And this year, we have 3 points of passion for our Christmas offering, 3 things that this Christmas offering will help us do that we couldn't otherwise do. The first one is to build a food distribution center on the back of our broadcast location in Newark, where we will be able to feed thousands of families for years to come and make a difference in that area of need in our region. I'm very excited about this opportunity. We have been feeding people, but this gives us a chance to make that a more permanent ministry in our community. Our Christmas offering will fund that. The second thing is to empower and raise up leaders who will take the message of Jesus around the world through scholarships for Highlands College to send people into full-time ministry, and for our Potential Intensive, our leadership academy right here that raises up leaders and creates Jesus-centered leadership in our world. We have an opportunity, guys, to help send over 1,000 people a year into ministry through Highlands College and Potential, and the Christmas offering will help us do that. And then the third thing is to extend our reach by launching a full online location of the Journey in 2021, where people can not only gather online, but connect and serve and be a part of a community, and the Christmas offering will help us do that. So I want to invite you to be a part of it. My hope is that every one of us will participate, and it's very simple to do that. I want to invite you, if you haven't already, to do 3 things this week: to pray and ask God what He would have you do. I'm not asking you to give a certain amount. I want you to ask God what He would have you do, and then just listen for His nudge, for His leading, and then give in our Christmas offering. You can do that in person by choosing Expansion, or most of us give online. You can choose Christmas offering there anytime this week leading into this coming weekend. And let's make a difference together. It's amazing what can happen when people turn their attention outward and become generous. And that's what our Christmas offering is all about. We're doing this because Jesus taught us that one person is worth everything. Do you believe that? I hope you do, because you were that one. You were worth everything to God. And now for all of us who are learning what it's like to have a life-giving relationship with God and have His blessing on our lives, we have an opportunity to do something for the one who is hungry, for the one who needs to be reached, for the one who hasn't heard the message of Jesus yet. So maybe you're blessed this year, maybe somehow it doesn't make sense, but you are in as good a financial place or even better than you were a year ago, and this is an opportunity to be generous for the one, show gratitude. Maybe you're struggling, things are tight. This is an opportunity to take a step of faith and do something for the one and believe God to bless it. And again, my hope is that all of us will participate. So right before we jump into the message this weekend, I want to take a moment and just pray that blessing over our community of faith, over you, as you pray, listen, and give together this week. Let's believe God together for big things. Father, we come to you. Our hearts are full of gratitude. We were the one. Maybe we are the one right now, even just over the past few weeks, we've become aware of your goodness at a new level in our lives, and how you searched for us, and how you reached for us, and how you wouldn't let us be lost. And now we have an opportunity as your people, God, to look like you, Jesus, to reach like you reach, to give like you give, to love like you love, to serve like you serve. And our Christmas offering, God, is the most tangible expression that we can think of to do that. And so I pray your blessing upon the journey. God, Newark, Hockessin, online. God, I pray your blessing on us as we respond to your leading and we give generously. Multiply it many times over for the fame of Jesus. It's our honor to be a part of it. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. And will you help me right now, everybody? Let's give it up for God's goodness in our lives and prepare our hearts for his word.
Well, hey, everybody. How are you guys doing this morning? Good? Waking up? Need a little bit more coffee? That's all good. Well, I am pumped to be hanging out with you as we wrap up this series. And like Pastor Mark said, my name is Abby. I'm our Next Steps pastor here. And I am just so grateful, not just to him for this opportunity this weekend, but so thankful to have a lead pastor who is so full of vision and passion and authenticity. Aren't you guys grateful for the leadership Pastor Mark gives to our community of faith? And I think it is a rare gift in today's world to see all of those things that he brings to us. And I've loved throughout this series, didn't see that coming. I think he has brought us this message of hope every week and just encouraged us to trust God more and more. And if you missed any week of that series, I want to encourage you, get online. You can check out all of our messages at our YouTube page. But like he mentioned, it is finally December, which means that Christmas time is finally here. Or almost here, right? Like it's just around the corner. And so in my family, we are pretty strict people who believe that Christmas time cannot start until Thanksgiving is over, all right? So, a few of you in the room are with me. And so last weekend, our family went all out. We got our Christmas tree, we decorated, we put up lights. I helped my kids make Christmas lists because now Amazon just sends you a catalog so that your kids know. They go through the catalog, they're like, I want this thing, I want this thing. And they know it can be at the door in 2 days or less. And I love that process of making a Christmas list as a kid. But I have learned that as an adult, the thing I enjoy even more than making a Christmas list is people who stick to the list that you give them. Anybody else enjoy when people just stick to the list? Yeah, you're like, Mom, it is on there for a reason. And growing up, my mom, now to be fair, my mom was very generous. She would get us things off of the list. But then every year, without fail, she would go rogue. And I'd have this moment where I would open something and I would say thank you, but I would be thinking, I am never going to wear this thing, or I'm never going to use this thing. Or sometimes I would be thinking, what is this? I have no idea what this is. I remember one year she got me this silicone like microwave popcorn bowl, even though I do not eat popcorn. One year she got me this running jacket. She knows I love to run. She got me this running jacket. But it had this hood attached to it that was like this super slick fitted hood. And I remember opening it and thinking, what kind of nerd would run around looking like some sort of Marvel superhero character, like with this hood up? But inevitably, just like she was always going to get me something that maybe I thought at first I wouldn't use, there was also a moment, and you've heard this phrase, that moms know best. And so I'm here to tell you that all of those things that she has gotten me, I have used extensively at some point throughout the year. In the last 3 or 4 years, every time I have run a race in the rain, you better believe that I have been wearing that running top with my hood, and I run around looking like a nerd, but my head is dry. So that's all that you need. And some of you have probably had that moment where you asked for one thing and you received another thing. And maybe it's gone far beyond just a Christmas list. You asked for one thing and got something else. Maybe you feel like that sometimes in life. You asked for one thing, but you received something totally different. You know, maybe you thought that a relationship would flourish, but now it's starting to fade. You thought you would get that promotion, but then it went to somebody else. at your firm. You thought that things would be easier by now financially, but it seems like they're just harder and there's still more month left at the end of the money. And all of a sudden you realize, hey, my expectations aren't matching reality. And many of us have had that experience this year, and we have to decide, okay, in those moments, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna complain about it? Are we gonna stay frustrated? Or are we gonna stay hopeful for what could be? And so today we're looking at a story about a group of people known as the Israelites. They were God's chosen people, which means that God had good things planned for them. He showed them his favor. And the good news is that for all of us, no matter who we are, no matter what our background is, no matter what we've done or we haven't done, we all have the opportunity to be part of God's family through our faith in Christ Jesus. And we all have the opportunity to share in the privileges of what it means to be part of the family of faith. And so a few weeks ago during this series, Pastor Mark shared a miracle that the Israelites had experienced. And so they were on their way to Canaan, the land that God had promised them, and their enemies were coming after them, and they didn't know what they were going to do. And then all of a sudden, the sea, a huge body of water, opened up so that they could go across. Their enemies were left behind them in demise, and it was a miracle. Think about that. Like they had saw firsthand what God would do to protect them. And so they start praising God and worshiping him. But then not too long after that, they're still on their way to the promised land, and they're not quite sure how long it's going to take them to get there. And they're back in the desert, and they're hungry, and they're tired, and they're like, this is not what I signed up for. This isn't on the list. They start to get disgruntled, and they start to complain. So we're going to pick it up here. This is Exodus 16, verse 3. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread that we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. So clearly we got some hangry people on our hands. Like they are just like, hey, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm not in a good mood. And what's so interesting about this part of the story is that the Israelites, they're kind of reminiscing about Egypt. But the truth is, when they were in Egypt, they were slaves. They were oppressed. They weren't even free. And so at first glance, it seems like they were living their best life in Egypt, but that could not be further from the truth. But in this moment, they're in the desert, and they're tired, and they're hungry, and they're just starting to let their current circumstances dictate their response. They start idealizing the past. And I think many of us have probably done this. Like, how many times have we said, hey, take me back to 2019. Those were the days, right? I want to go back to 2019. But the truth is that if we pause, we'll admit 2019 was not all it was cracked up to be. I know I've got moments like that in my life. I feel like sometimes as a mom of young kids, I'll be like, take me back to a time when I could do whatever I wanted. And then I stop and I think, because sometimes it can feel like, man, the demands of little kids is overwhelming. And I'm like, man, take me back when I had all that free time. But the truth is, I don't want to go back. I love the joy that my kids bring to my life, but so often we start thinking in this right here, right now moment, and we stop thinking about what God has ahead of us. We stay stuck. We start complaining, and that's what was happening to the Israelites here. They had so much more ahead of them, but all they were doing was thinking about what was behind them and what they were experiencing in that current moment. And the truth is that God can never take us into what he has for us next if we are stuck complaining and thinking that we want to go back in the past. And so even though the Israelite people probably did not deserve it, God heard their complaints, and he decided he was going to do something about it. The Lord said to Moses, the leader of the Israelites, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day, the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need that day. I will test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. So God is telling Moses, hey, I see these people, I hear their need, I hear their cries, and hey, I'm going to do something. I will literally rain down food from heaven. I'm going to take care of them. And I know that sounds crazy, especially if you're new to this whole church thing or to the Bible, but stick with me because what we see here is a God of provision. But sometimes God provides for us in ways that we don't always expect. He provides for us in ways that weren't always on our list. And so he tells them, hey, I'm going to send you some food, but there's a little addendum to his provision. And he asks them to take only what they need for that day. Did you notice that? He promises to provide for them, but it requires those people to trust him every single day. And I think that it is that everyday part where some of us get tripped up. You know, we don't want to wake up and start from scratch. We want to have everything that we need for tomorrow and the day after that, the day after that, the day after that, because we think that that's where we find our security. And there is nothing wrong with working hard and utilizing our resources wisely. In fact, that's a good thing to do. But many of us can admit that sometimes we tell ourselves that we're working hard, but really what we're doing is working hard at hoarding. We're hoarding our time and our possessions and our money and our energy and our toilet paper. And what are we doing? We're doing it all out of fear. We want to control, and so we hoard out of fear. And the truth is that we can never experience God in that place of fear. God cannot provide for us when we are too busy trying to provide for ourselves. That's not the way that it works. So God is not giving his people a test here so that they'll fail. He's giving them a test so that they can trust him, and he can keep giving them more. He can keep providing for them. And so here's what we read, what happens next. The next morning, the area around the camp was wet with dew. When the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw it. What is it? They asked each other. They had no idea what it was. And Moses told them, it is the food that the Lord has given you to eat. It's not what they expected. I didn't see that coming. And just like every Christmas, when I open that gift from my mom and I'm like, what is this? I've never seen this before. So often I'll learn a little bit later, that's not what I asked for, but it was just what I needed. And God knows his people. He knows, hey, this might not have been exactly what you asked for, but this is exactly what you need. And so he answers their cries, just not in the way that they would expect. And I think sometimes we miss out on what God is doing because it doesn't look the way that we thought it would look. It doesn't look the way that we hoped that it would look. And we're like, hey, I was asking for this other thing, but sometimes I think what happens is that if we would really receive everything we ask God for, we would miss out on what God has for us. Because his ways are not our ways. He sees things that we don't see. His perspective is so much different and so much better than ours. But we can trust, even when we don't receive what we've asked for, we can trust we serve a God who will give us exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask for or imagine, because that's what he tells us in his word. But we have to come to a place of trust. And the Israelites did as well. It says, these are the Lord's instructions. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over. Those who gathered only a little had enough. Each family had just what it needed. And then Moses told them, do not keep any of it until morning. So have you ever had something that maybe you put at the top of your Christmas list and you finally received it and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted. You savor it, you protect it. But then what happens to a lot of us, especially if it's a material thing, is that we start to think, hey, if I just had another one, and what if I just had a little bit more? And what if I just had a little bit more? And that's because there's this human desire in us that is asking us, hey, come on, stockpile it all. That's where you're going to find your security. And so Moses knows this, and he reminds them of what God has said. Hey, don't take more than you need for today. There'll be more tomorrow. And so the Israelites have a decision to make in this moment. Are they going to trust God, or are they going to trust in themselves and what they think is best? And I think all of us come to a point in our lives where we have to decide, are we going to trust God, or are we going to trust in ourselves and what we think is best? Are we going to rush around collecting all that we can, fooling ourselves into thinking that at the end of the day, God's not really going to provide for us? Are we going to trust him, or are we going to do things our way, his way, or our way? Are we going to try to convince ourselves that we just don't have time to practice a slot and spot, a time and a place where we read the Bible and pray? Are we going to convince ourselves that we don't have time to serve on the J team and make a difference in the world around us because we got too many other things going on? We going to trust what God says, or what we think is best? Are we going to try to stockpile everything we can for our own savings account instead of being generous? What are we going to do? Are we going to refuse to give our own emotional energy and capacity and presence to the people around us in fear that we won't have what we need for ourselves? Are we going to trust God when he asks us to give and serve and pray and forgive and obey his word and get in relationship with other people? Are we going to say, hey, God, I hear what you're asking me. I know what will happen if I do those things, but I'm going to still do it my way? We all have to make that decision. And here's the decision that the Israelites made in that moment. Some of them didn't listen. Sound familiar, right? Like, some of them didn't listen, and they kept some of it until morning. But by then, it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell. And Moses was very angry with them. It was gross. They tried to take matters into their own hands. And what did they end up with? A pile of food that was inedible. They thought it was going to give them what they wanted, but it had turned bad. And I think that's happens to so many of us, that whenever we hold on to something that's not meant for us to hold on to, it gets gross. Our passive-aggressive behaviors, our scarcity mentality, our fear that there just won't be enough, that stuff that we're holding on to, our bitterness towards someone else, our greediness, our pride, none of those things are meant for us to hold on to them. And somehow we think, hey, these are the things that are going to serve me. But the truth is, those things will never serve us. We just end up serving them. And when we serve them, guess what? We cannot serve the God who tells us he will provide for us. It just gets gross. And so we think we're going to find security in those things, but we never do, because security is not found in scrambling for scraps. Security is found in trusting God. There's no other way. As so many of us find ourselves scrambling, and we don't even know why. Some of us are convinced that we're doing it because it's 2020 and we're like, money is tight and resources are scarce. But again, if we are honest with ourselves, we scrambled in 2019. And 2018, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. We have this scrambling spirit about us because we just don't, at the end of the day, trust God to provide for us. And so we're scrambling around trying to get to the next thing, and scrambling around trying to make ends meet, and scrambling around trying to make a little bit more money, and scrambling around to get someone's approval, and scrambling around for affirmation, and we're scrambling around thinking, if I just had this thing, then I'll have the comfort and security that I want. But we never do. We end up worried and anxious And sometimes we end up delusional because we think, hey, if I just had this thing, I'd be okay. If I just had that job, if I just got to go to that school, if I just got that grade, if I just got that promotion, if I just had this kind of spouse, if my kids would just do this thing or that thing, and we fool ourselves into thinking that that's where we'll find our security. And that could never be farther from the truth. Because security is not found in those things. Security is found in trusting God. And a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak at Potential, at our leadership intensive. And I was talking to one of our leaders there, and she was just sharing with me all the things that God has done in her life. She just turned 50, but being in a relationship, a real relationship with God is a new thing for her. And she was sharing with me, hey, she's like, for so long, I thought my purpose was solely in trying to be a wife. And then I thought my purpose was solely in trying to be a mom. And my purpose was solely in trying to be a small business owner. And she's like, it's all on me. I own my own business. If it doesn't thrive, I can't survive. And she was talking about how she was always trying to look for purpose in all these other places. But she said in the last couple of months, I've stopped scrambling, basically. She said, I've realized that my security was not going to be found in any of those things. She said, right now, I have more joy than I ever thought possible. And she just emailed me yesterday morning, and she said, hey, my family and I have been talking and praying, and we have something set aside for the Christmas offering. Can I give it now, or do I have to wait? And I said, you can give it now. But what an incredible picture that she thought, and so many of us do. We think we're going to find our security in all these places, but that's not true. We find our security in God, and when we try to look for it in these other places, what happens? We end up holding a bunch of attitudes, perceptions, behaviors that are never going to serve us, and in fact, are gross. They're keeping us from God. And so what happened for the Israelites was right after this, the people, they gathered up the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. They had everything that they needed when they trusted God. When they trusted God. And I have a almost 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at my house, so meal times are hectic. That's the word that we'll use. Like meal times are hectic, and there is always a whole lot of food dropped on the floor. So my 2-year-old, I am pretty sure like 30% of it goes in his stomach, and 10% somewhere like on his bib, 10% in his hair that we will find a few days later, and then like the remaining 50% of the food goes all over the floor. And sometimes I'll find it days later, and I was like, is that a blueberry, a raisin, chocolate? Who really knows at this point? And so for me, I have a cue. Right after breakfast time is over, I get my kids up. I open my basement door, and my dog comes bounding up the stairs. And what does he do? He's like, jackpot, scraps. And he starts scrambling around, and he's like, yeah, I'll take that crusty egg. Yeah, I don't care if that's a blueberry or a raisin or a piece of chocolate. Like, I'm here for it. And so he'll go crazy, like trying to get everything that he can off the floor. And I believe that some of us, especially with everything that this year has brought, are scrambling around for scraps. And sometimes we have convinced ourselves that this is what we really want. Hey, this is good enough. This is what I want. This is good enough. And we're scrambling around like a dog. And I think God, our Father in heaven, is looking at all of us, no matter who we are, no matter what we've done. He's looking at all of us full of love and saying, hey, I've got more for you than just some scraps on the floor. Stop scrambling around. And so our God is a God of provision for all of us. Like he is holding out a platter of provision. And sometimes it is full of fresh eggs and fresh blueberries and everything we want. And sometimes it may not be what we want, but it's exactly what we need to get by. Because he refuses to forget about us if we will learn to trust him. We just can't always see what he offers because we're complaining. We're distracted. We're discouraged. We're working ourselves to the bone. We've got these broken beliefs about who God really is. And I believe God is just saying to us today, hey, trust me. Trust me. Trust me. And for many of us, one of the hardest areas to trust God is with our finances. If you're not sure what you believe yet about Jesus, that's all right. You can take a pass on this. But if you live in the freedom of what God has done through us through Christ Jesus, being generous and giving our first back to what matters to God is not just a good thing to do. It's an act of trust. It's an act of obedience. And so when we set aside something that the Bible calls a tithe, which is just 10% of everything we make, and we give it back to what matters to God, we're not just saying we trust God, we're actually trusting God. We're acting out of that belief. And I think for many of us, myself included, sometimes it's so hard to take that first step of obedience. But we have to remember that whenever God asks something from us, it's always because he has more for us. He never asks something from us just so he can take it. He asks because he has more for us. And trust unlocks blessings in our lives that we will never receive any other way. I think sometimes there are things that we have in our lives that when it comes to obedience, God's like, hey, you can do it or you cannot do it. The choice is yours. The blessing is there. You just have to make the decision. And I remember years ago when we first got married, making that decision to start tithing. And it was tough at the time because we had just gotten married and our combined household income was just about $50,000 a year, but our combined student loan debt was $150,000. And so we were just scrambling around. We were trying to make ends meet. We were trying to figure out how to do it all and how to afford everything. And that decision changed everything for us because we did not feel like we had anything to give. It always felt like there was more month left over at the end of the money. But I'll never forget the way that changed everything for us. A couple of years into our marriage, after making that decision to give, I was sitting with a woman. I was doing some marketing and consulting work for her. And it had been a really tough week for us financially. And so we had an unexpected bill. It was at the point we could not go to the grocery store until Friday. And right before I left that meeting with her, she handed me a check. And up until that point in my life, I'd never gotten a check for work I had not done yet. This was kind of our initial face-to-face. And I remember taking it, and I was like, hey, trying to give it back. I was like, I can't take this. I didn't do anything yet. And she said, no, take it. I've got faith in you. And I remember going home that night and telling Andy, I was like, look at this. Look at this. We can go to the grocery store. And I remember going to the grocery store and we didn't just get necessities. I got ice cream, he got chips, and I was like, this is God's provision at work right here, right now. But that's how God works when we trust him. We had nothing, and in that moment, he knew how he was going to provide for us. I had no idea, but he did because we can trust him. But we did not know about that check when we started giving. We don't always know what the blessing will be when we step out in obedience. We just have to trust that the blessing will be there because he already said it would be. It's our choice to trust him. And so the Israelites, here's how their story ends. They were looking at the food, and what did they do? They decided they would call the food manna. Which means, what is it? What is it? They were puzzled. They didn't even know what it was. And since they had no idea, they had to figure out something that they were going to call it. And they did not know exactly what it was, but they knew it was exactly what they needed because they had trusted their God. And when they stopped scrambling around and they started putting their security in the God alone, they had exactly what they needed. So I want to encourage you this weekend, look around. Where is your manna? What has God provided for you? What are you looking at thinking, what is it? I didn't ask for this. This isn't what I expected. What are you looking in the face? Depression, addiction, a broken relationship, a lost job, financial insecurity. You're staring at this and you are thinking, what is this? I didn't ask for it. But God is looking at that same situation. He's looking at that same circumstance and he is there. And he's like, hey, you're trying to think, hey, what is it? And he's going, what it is a miracle in the making. You just can't see it yet. You gotta trust me. You gotta trust me. And this morning, if maybe you've had something where you're like, hey, this is an area where I know I need to trust God. And today, his word has been an encouragement to you to take a step of faith and trust him in a new way. Will you just raise your hand? I want to pray over us together this morning. Yeah. And God, we come to you and we thank you. You are a God of provision. We pray that when we look at our lives, when we see all of the things that maybe we didn't ask for or we didn't want or things that we feel like have been done to us, God, we pray right now, as we look and say, what is it? We see the miracle in the making. God, I pray that you would give all of us a renewed hope, a renewed courage, a renewed confidence, God, to see you as our provider and trust you in your word, Lord. And all of us at some point in our lives have a decision to make. We have to decide my way or God's way. So let me tell you a little bit about God's way. God loved all of us so much that he sent his son, Jesus, to die for us. And he did it so that we could be brought into a right relationship with him. He couldn't stand the thought of us being separated from him by our sin forever. So he said, hey, I'm gonna pay that price for you. And he sent his son, Jesus, for us. That's God's way. We read in the word of God that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, that we cannot experience God except through him. And so all of us have a decision to make. I made mine when I was 19 years old, my way or God's way. And once you choose God's way, faith in Jesus, there's no boxes to check, there's no hoops to jump through. All you have to do is say, Jesus, here I am. I believe in you. And so if that's you in this moment, you've never made that decision fully to put your faith in Jesus, I want to invite you to make today your day. You can pray this with me. God, thank you for the gift of your son, Jesus. I'm tired of trying to do things my way. God, I choose your way. Today, I make Jesus leader and Lord of my life. I'm not going to try to hold on to all of this stuff on my own. I'm not trying to figure out my purpose on my own. I give my life to you. And if that's you in this moment, I want to encourage you, raise your hand. We believe that's the most important decision you're ever going to make. If you're joining us online, you can just type faith in the comments right now. Yeah. And then Journey, can you help me celebrate everyone making that decision to put their faith in Jesus today?